Fishmados, what are they? Who made them? Would you let that inside of your house? I don't think so. Some part fish, mainly tomato, created in a lab by people in white coats for the sole purpose of world domination and destruction. That's right, Fishmados have been actually created in lab, taking proteins of a fish, putting it into a tomato, and all parts death and destruction. It's actually so lethal and so dangerous that it's a part of a new movie plot by James Cameron. So that means it's going to be at least 6 to 8 hours long. It's going to be an Ultra 5KD, which means you're going to be able to smell the fish, taste the tomato, and do it all in 3D. Be on the lookout for Fishmado NATO coming to a theater near you. All right, thank you for joining me today with Kansas City Skeptics. In all seriousness, today's video is going to be about GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, how they're used in the agriculture industry, and then how that has been kind of pinned as the enemy against the organic industry, the all-natural industry, and kind of that initiative. So for those of you that don't know, GMOs, genetically modified organisms, are when you take specific regions of DNA from one organism, you put it into another organism so that it can have similar properties. The Fishmado thing is real. The company that created it has actually gone under, so it is not something that you can find on the market. It will not be put into market anytime soon. It is a failed enterprise at this point. But what they were doing is taking regions of DNA from a fish that is very good at surviving cold temperatures and putting that into a tomato so that the tomato could survive cold temperatures, which means you are able to ship them in colder temperatures and possibly even grow them in a broader range of temperatures as well. Namely, that you are able to ship them without bruising, without deteriorating in cold temperatures, which means you can ship them farther and they can stay viable longer on the shelves. So again, genetically modified organisms, taking specific regions that you are very specifically targeting and putting that into another organism. It doesn't mean a tomato is going to flop around and grow gills and have scales. None of the genes associated with that were taken from the fish. None of the genes can just spontaneously turn back into a fish or anything like that. But today's video is going to dive into more of the organic industry. It's 5 pillars that it kind of likes to stand on, and breaking down each of those pillars into the meat and potatoes of what it actually means and if the organic industry actually has any foundation to stand on at all. So if that interests you, hang with me. It's a longer video, but I promise you it'll be engaging and hopefully you learn something as well. The main talking points that you're going to hear from the organic industry is that we as humans have a responsibility to take care of the natural world, the ecosystems as they are, and to maintain as much of that as possible. I don't disagree with that at all. And in fact, if you are for maintaining natural environments and reducing deforestation, then you should actually be in favor of GMOs, and you should actually be in favor of the agriculture industry, not the organic industry. And here's really 2 main reasons why. Number 1, the organic industry is anti man-made fertilizers. So there's a process called the Haber-Bosch or Haber-Bosch process that was discovered back in the early 1900s. This is a process of taking nitrogen out of the air and getting it into the soil. If we erase that from history and that process is never discovered, then they've actually done mathematical models that show the Earth's natural nitrogen in the soil can only provide enough food for about 4 billion people. That's billion with a B. We are currently at 7.8 billion people with a B, which means we have far surpassed what this Earth can support in way of population size if we had never fixed nitrogen into the soil in order to use it artificially. So unless you want to get rid of half the people on this earth, there is no turning back to go towards just natural fertilizers. We have to get nitrogen into the soil to support the plant growth. So that's issue number one. Organic industry doesn't want to use artificial fertilizers. That's an impossibility. If you go back to that, again, we are erasing half of the population. Issue number two is the use of land. You have to cut forests, you have to deforest because we need more access to land. Well, if you actually look at agriculture industry and you look at GMOs, their entire intention is to maximize profit through narrowing their margins, which means they want to run as efficiently as possible. They want to make sure that every stalk of corn that they plant, they get as much calorie density out of that plant as possible, which means they are getting as much corn as possible to the market. Whereas the organic industry, that's not their main concern. Their main concern is that they do everything that feels natural, that Mother Earth provides, that is safe for the environment, which means they might sacrifice their crops, their crop yield, in order for it to be safe and natural. So if you are planting an acre of land the way that GMOs in agriculture are used, let's say you get 1 ton of corn from that acre. I'm just making that number up, I have no idea. Let's say you get 1 ton of corn. Well, if you actually look at the math, if you plant that same acre of land with organic corn and you don't use any artificial anything, it's all organic and natural, your yield drops way below that. So we actually need 1.5 acres or maybe 2 acres of land to produce the same amount of food that we are already producing at this point in time. So if you don't want to cut down more forests, you cannot be for the organic industry because in itself, it needs more land just to produce what we are already producing. So point number one, if you are anti-deforestation, you need to be pro-GMO and you need to be pro-agriculture industry, not organic industry. That brings us to point number two, which is the use of herbicides and pesticides. If you are anti the use of herbicides and pesticides, then you should be in favor of the big agriculture companies and GMOs. Reason being is that a lot of GMO research is focused on the reduction of pesticides. Pesticides are sprayed to prevent bugs and insects from attacking the plant. There are some plants that exist naturally in this world where if a bug eats it, it will use certain chemicals within the plant to destroy that bug's intestinal lining and kill it. Now, if we can take the genes from that plant that kill that bug and put it into the crops we care about, corn, tomatoes, anything else that we want to eat, then we are essentially allowing that plant to fight for itself and we are able to reduce the amount of pesticides that we have to use. Now for herbicides, right now a lot of herbicide research is making sure that the plant is strong enough to withstand a large amount of herbicide. So I do see the concern in that because we're trying to kill these weeds that are building up defenses against the herbicides, and then we have to use more, so we have to make the plant stronger so that we can use more herbicides. So I do understand that point. Here is the major flaw in the organic industry line of thinking, that is that they have herbicides that will be more effective or less damaging or both. So if we just stop using herbicides altogether, then that means the weeds will win. Our yield will go way down, we'll produce a whole lot less food, which go back to point number one is an issue. And when we produce a whole lot less food, we now have to put on more land or take up more land. So you have to use some sort of herbicides. You have to be able to control the weed population somehow. Organic industry will tell you that there are organic ways of doing that. But if you look at the research, those methods are far less effective, and some of them are actually more dangerous to the environment and more dangerous to you than the herbicides that we are currently using on the market. So again, if you are anti-use of pesticides, anti-use of herbicides, you should be for GMOs and you should be for big agriculture. Because for points 3 and 4, I'm going to tackle them at the same time. There's a lot of overlap in them. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock both those out at the same time. Point number 3, that the big agriculture companies and the GMOs are far less healthy and far less safe than the organic industry. This always makes me laugh so hard because of how false and wrong this is. It's such a blatant lie and just a terrible talking point. So let me start with this example. What do you think that is? What kind of fruit is that? That's a banana. That is what bananas look like before humans got their hands on them and started breeding them to be the Cavendish banana that we have today, which is not natural at all. It doesn't even contain seeds. Basically, every single Cavendish banana that you eat is the same organism because we are just creating copies of that over and over again and replanting it. It doesn't actually have any seeds to plant new trees with. So the bananas that we eat today is very much man manipulated even before GMOs were a thing. What about this one? Do you know what that is? That is corn. That is what corn looked like before humans got their hands on it. And we have specifically interbred specific strains, specific organisms to make sure that the corn looks like it is today and contains as much nutrient and caloric density as possible. Now, if you want to argue that that's not GMOs because it was done out in nature, it was done out in the fields with human hands or whatever your definition of organic or natural is, well, then you're missing the larger point that it doesn't exist in the natural world whatsoever. We still had to interfere with it in order to make it look like what we wanted to look like. The only difference is now we are doing it with extreme precision rather than just trying to grab plants, make them breed, try again, and taking sometimes hundreds of generations, thousands of generations to get what we want. Instead, we can do it in a lab. We can do it with precision. So that's really the only difference, is how much time do you want to waste trying to accomplish something. So the even more terrible aspect of this argument is that GMOs are less healthy for you. And a lot of GMO research is designated to the exact opposite of that. Again, they want fruits and vegetables that people want to buy by making them tastier, by making them last longer, by making them more nutrient dense. For example, golden rice is a GMO product where they take genes that produce vitamin A and they put it into rice so that rice can produce vitamin A. Why are they doing this? Because a lot of cultures in the East that are malnourished due to a lack of access to calories, a lot of their diets consist mainly of rice. Now, rice naturally doesn't contain vitamin A, so when they're eating a large portion of rice and they're not getting their vitamin A, a lot of kids, unfortunately, are going blind. Around 250 to 500,000 kids around the world every year will go blind, go blind due to vitamin A deficiency, and around half of those will die within 12 months of going blind because of deficiencies in their diet. GMOs want to help solve that problem with golden rice, and yet there's a huge amount of pushback that all GMOs are bad. All GMOs are going to cause issues, which means these kids are not going to have as much access to vitamin A, and you are causing kids to go blind and lose their lives simply because you're anti-technology. So when you really want to get into the point of number 3, you can cause extreme damage in way of human death by being anti-GMO and anti-big agriculture. Just to stand on sit on your high horse and say you want to make people healthier, go organic, is an extremely faulty proposition to try and stand on. So that brings us to our 5th and final point, which is that the big ag industry and GMOs are evil and nefarious, and they only care about profits and money and buying big houses for themselves, whereas the organic industry just wants to live off the land, and they all want to hold hands, and they all just want to live in trees together and do no harm. So obviously that's wrong, that's faulty, it's not true. The organic industry is a $50 billion industry that is growing by around 6 to 15% every single year. And it is true that the agriculture industry GMO industry combined is worth trillions of dollars, so still much more than the organic industry. The organic industry is by no means a small mom and pop shop with your best interest in mind. Again, the whole working for money automatically makes you bad is just faulty in itself. If agriculture industry really only cares about money, then they are operating on as tight a budgets as possible to maximize those profits, which means I'm not just going to throw a bunch of herbicides and pesticides on a field. I want to know the exact, very exact amount that I have to use in order to maximize my profits. I want to know how to use as little land as possible and get as many plants as possible to grow on that land so that I can maximize my profit. I want to make sure that everything I get to the table actually makes it to the table. It doesn't die in trucks. It doesn't die in food bins waiting for you in the market, because that means I have to make more of it. I want it to last long and be healthy and get to your mouths so that it can nourish you. Whereas if we don't care about those things, then we are creating a very loose market with lots of wide margins. And again, we are not in control of the exact numbers. So just because you care about profit margins does not automatically make you bad. It can actually make you very efficient and good in some cases. And to say that the organic industry does not care about any of that and they just care about love and health is a complete lie. They care about money just as much. They're just selling you a different pitch. They're just appealing to your bias for nature by selling you these goods. So that sums up the entire conversation about why the organic industry, if you care about the planet, if you care about loved ones, if you care about children starving around the world, if you care about all these things, eating organic does not mean you're being a good person that's solving all these problems. In most instances, it actually means you're doing more harm than good. So thank you for sticking with me. I know this one was a little bit longer. For our next video, we're going to be talking about lots more science, lots more critical thinking. So stay tuned for more to come. And as always, thank you for joining me.